You don't sit up there and pass on Caitlin Clark. It was stupid, Team USA. It was a dumb decision. The idiocy of Team USA women's basketball. How dare you make this decision? It's stupid. And they went from 4,000 in attendance to 17,000. This girl is box office.
When analysts revisited Clark's rookie campaign statistics, many argued the numbers alone should have secured her a place in any international lineup. She averaged 19.2 points alongside 8.4 assists per game, figures that not only placed her among the league's most productive guards but also demonstrated a rare dual-threat capability as both scorer and playmaker. Arena attendance surged whenever she appeared, and broadcasters reported noticeable spikes in ratings tied directly to her matchups. In practical terms, she wasn't just producing on the court, she was altering the commercial landscape of women's basketball. Yet despite those measurable impacts, decision-makers seemed hesitant to prioritize her when it mattered most. Observers pointed out that Clark's presence had turned regular season games into must-watch events for casual viewers who had never previously followed the sport. Ticket resale markets surged, merchandise sales climbed, and highlight clips featuring her long-range shooting and creative passing routinely trended across social platforms. For many fans, she represented a bridge between established followers of the game and a new generation discovering it for the first time. That cultural influence, however, didn't translate into immediate institutional trust when roster selections were finalized. Some insiders suggested that statistics alone rarely determine international selections, particularly when veteran leadership is valued as highly as raw performance. Still, critics argued that Clark's production wasn't merely impressive for a newcomer, it rivaled or exceeded that of players already considered fixtures in national competition. The disconnect between her on-court dominance and her absence from the roster became a major talking point among commentators and supporters alike. Debates filled television panels, podcasts, and fan forums, all asking the same question: how could someone reshaping the sport's popularity be left watching from home? Clark later explained that she studied those discussions quietly, choosing not to respond publicly at the time. She said she wanted to understand every perspective, even the ones that criticized her readiness. Instead of dismissing skeptics, she treated their doubts as scouting reports, identifying areas where she could sharpen her game. She spent extra hours reviewing footage, refining her conditioning, and strengthening aspects of her play that might translate more effectively to the international style, which often emphasizes physicality and tactical discipline. What stood out most, according to Clark, was how the experience forced her to mature quickly. She described it as a crash course in professional resilience, learning to accept decisions she couldn't control while still maintaining confidence in her own ability. That lesson, she noted, may ultimately prove more valuable than any single accolade. Because while awards and selections can fluctuate, the discipline required to earn them is something she can carry forward indefinitely. In hindsight, the numbers from her rookie year have taken on almost symbolic significance. They're no longer just statistics on a stat sheet, they become part of a larger narrative about recognition, timing, and persistence. And now that she's officially back in the national program, those same figures are being re-examined as evidence that her eventual inclusion may have been inevitable all along.
Along with nearly losing the gold medal game to France, the U.S. women's team was caught up in controversy leading up to the Olympics because Caitlin Clark was not on the team. The argument not to take Clark, a rising global megastar in the sport, was in part because she had not participated in many Team USA offseason functions, and also because there were women with more national team experience who had earned the right to play at the Olympics.
Caitlin Clark has finally spoken publicly after receiving official confirmation that she will represent Team USA in the upcoming FIBA Women's World Cup cycle, and the timing of her statement could not be more dramatic. After spending months largely absent from media appearances and keeping a low profile during what insiders described as one of the most physically and emotionally demanding stretches of her career, Clark's return to the spotlight instantly reignited debate across the basketball world. Her silence had fueled speculation, rumors, and endless commentary about her mindset following a turbulent sophomore season marked by injuries, scrutiny, and lingering questions about her place among the sports elite. Now, with her roster spot secured for the 2026 qualifying tournament set to take place in Puerto Rico from March 11th through March 17th, Clark is no longer letting others define her narrative. This moment carries extra weight because it comes after a deeply controversial decision that stunned fans the previous year. When Clark was left off the 2024 Olympic roster for the Games in Paris, many observers believed it was only temporary, assuming she would quickly earn her way back into favor. Instead, she disappeared from interviews, avoided public commentary, and focused almost entirely on rebuilding her game behind the scenes. That silence made her first extended remarks now feel less like a routine interview and more like a revelation. In that conversation, she opened up about the disappointment she felt, the motivation it sparked, and the determination that pushed her to evolve both mentally and physically. The situation was especially charged because her omission from the Olympic lineup happened despite record-setting performances that had already transformed the visibility of women's basketball. Clark described the call informing her of the decision as a turning point. She admitted she initially expected the conversation to be procedural, a simple confirmation rather than a rejection. Instead, she learned she would not be traveling with the national squad, a realization she said forced her to confront harsh realities about reputation, hierarchy, and timing in elite sports. Now, the narrative has shifted dramatically. Rather than being defined by what she didn't achieve, she's defining herself through what she fought to reclaim. Fans immediately began debating the implications of her selection, with many celebrating her return as overdue recognition while others questioned how the roster dynamics will unfold once the competition begins. Clark, however, made it clear she's not focused on public opinion. According to her, the only thing that matters is stepping onto the court prepared to prove she belongs. Her statement also addressed the emotional aspect of the journey. She acknowledged that setbacks can either fracture an athlete's confidence or forge a stronger competitive edge. In her case, she insisted the disappointment became fuel, a constant reminder that nothing in professional sports is guaranteed, no matter how impressive your statistics or how loud the fan support might be. That mindset, she says, is what carried her through months of rehabilitation, training, and self-reflection. With her name now officially attached to the national roster, Clark's story has shifted from exclusion to redemption. And as anticipation builds for the tournament, one thing is certain: the basketball world will be watching closely to see whether this long-awaited comeback becomes the defining chapter of her career.
She is good enough to be on the team. Based on how Caitlin Clark was playing at the time, she was worthy of being on this team. This is Caitlin Clark up against Jewell Loyd, Diana Taurasi, and Kelsey Plum. Yeah, it's tough when you see it in front of you, right? Chelsea Gray's not even on this graph. Why isn't Chelsea Gray on this graph, you may ask? Great question. Chelsea Gray started the beginning of the season injured.
Clark has since revealed that she internalized every critique that surfaced during that period, even the harshest ones questioning her readiness for international competition. Rather than dismissing those doubts as unfair, she treated them as challenges, benchmarks she wanted to surpass. She acknowledged that reading thousands of opinions about her abilities wasn't easy, but she believed confronting that scrutiny head-on helped strengthen her mental toughness. In her words, the rejection didn't just test her skill set, it tested her identity as an athlete. What made the experience especially painful, she explained, was the timing. She felt she had just completed a season that changed perceptions of women's basketball, drawing unprecedented attention and inspiring new fans to tune in. To go from that surge of momentum to being left off the Olympic roster created a sharp emotional contrast. It forced her to confront a difficult truth: influence and performance don't always translate into immediate institutional validation. Privately, she wrestled with questions about whether the system fully recognized the shift happening within the sport. Some supporters argued that the decision reflected long-standing habits within governing bodies, a tendency to prioritize established hierarchies over emerging stars. Clark herself didn't accuse anyone directly, but she admitted the situation made her think deeply about how organizations balance tradition with evolution. She came to see the episode not as a personal slight but as an example of how complex roster decisions can be behind the scenes. Determined not to let frustration derail her progress, she channeled her energy into preparation. She worked closely with trainers to rebuild strength after injuries, focusing on durability so she could handle the physical demands of international play. She also spent time studying leadership techniques, observing how veteran players communicate, organize teammates, and maintain composure under pressure. Her goal wasn't simply to make the team eventually, it was to arrive ready to contribute in every possible way. Those close to her say the transformation was noticeable. She became more patient, more strategic, and more deliberate in how she approached both practice and competition. Instead of chasing validation, she concentrated on mastering details, footwork, decision-making, defensive anticipation. The mindset shift, according to coaches, elevated her from a spectacular talent to a complete player capable of thriving in multiple systems. Now that she has earned her place on the national roster, Clark views the earlier rejection as a defining lesson rather than a setback. She believes it forced her to grow faster than she otherwise might have, sharpening both her skills and her perspective. And as she prepares to represent her country on the international stage, she carries that experience with her not as a burden, but as proof that adversity can be transformed into motivation when met with determination.
Talk about the Olympics, though.
On the night that I broke the news, someone read me the list that Caitlin Clark was not on the Olympic team, which was June 7th. She had just had 30 points and 7 threes against Washington in an amazing game. And bottom line on this is they did not want her on the team. There was either a sense that she needs to wait her turn. They wanted to give Diana Taurasi the going away present. Name another time when you would ever give an athlete a going away present with an Olympic berth. Outrageous. So Caitlin said, hey, it's okay. And in interviews, she said, it's all right, I'll make it the next time.
The public reaction to the roster announcement was immediate and intense. Within minutes of the official list being released, social media platforms filled with side-by-side statistical graphics comparing Clark's performance metrics to those of selected players. Supporters circulated highlight compilations showcasing her deep shooting range, creative passing angles, and late-game composure, arguing that leaving her off the team ignored both performance data and fan enthusiasm. The conversation quickly escalated into a trending movement, with hashtags advocating for her inclusion dominating timelines for 3 consecutive days. Sports networks joined the discussion, and analysts across programs, including segments on ESPN, dissected every aspect of the decision. Commentators debated whether the selection committee had underestimated the marketing and engagement impact Clark brought to the sport. Some pointed to viewership analytics suggesting that interest in women's basketball coverage dipped noticeably once it became clear she wouldn't be competing in the Olympic tournament. While such fluctuations can be influenced by many variables, the timing fueled speculation that her absence affected audience enthusiasm more than officials anticipated. Fans didn't limit their reactions to statistics. Many framed the situation as symbolic of a generational crossroads, arguing that Clark's style represented the future while the roster choices reflected the past. Others pushed back, insisting that international competition requires cohesion and that established veterans provide stability younger players haven't yet proven they can match. The debate wasn't merely about one athlete, it became a referendum on how sports institutions adapt to rapid cultural change. Clark observed all of it quietly. She later admitted that reading comments was both motivating and overwhelming. On one hand, the support reassured her that fans believed in her potential. On the other, the criticism reminded her how quickly public opinion can shift. Rather than letting either extreme dictate her mindset, she tried to treat the noise as background information, something to learn from without allowing it to define her. Behind the scenes, she doubled down on preparation. Trainers reported that she increased her conditioning workload, focusing on endurance drills designed to simulate the faster tempo of international play. She also spent additional hours reviewing game film, analyzing defensive schemes commonly used by top national teams. According to those close to her, the goal wasn't just to return to form but to return improved, more versatile, more resilient, and more tactically aware. In retrospect, the online uproar surrounding her omission may have played an unexpected role in her comeback story. It kept her name in conversations even while she was absent from competition, ensuring that anticipation for her return continued to build. By the time her selection was finally confirmed, the narrative had already shifted from disappointment to redemption, setting the stage for what many now view as one of the most compelling arcs in recent basketball history.
It was a stupid decision because it compromises what your ultimate goal is, which is to elevate the WNBA brand. How could you be that idiotic and not make that call when throughout history, Team USA has been in part about marketing? It's dumb.
Much of the controversy surrounding Clark's earlier exclusion centered on comparisons with established stars, particularly Diana Taurasi and Chelsea Gray, whose reputations within international basketball circles are deeply entrenched. Decision-makers ultimately leaned toward experience, citing Taurasi's 5 Olympic gold medals as proof of her reliability under pressure. From a traditional standpoint, the logic was straightforward: when competing on the global stage, proven veterans are often viewed as safer choices than rising talents, regardless of recent form. However, critics argued that such reasoning reflected a broader philosophical divide about how national teams should evolve. On one side were those who believed continuity and chemistry built over years of competition are essential to maintaining dominance. On the other were voices insisting that the sport's rapid growth demands fresh faces capable of connecting with modern audiences. Clark's supporters claimed she represented precisely the kind of generational shift, a player whose style, charisma, and visibility could redefine how international women's basketball is perceived worldwide. The debate intensified when it became known that Gray had been dealing with a foot injury leading up to the selection period. Skeptics questioned whether choosing an athlete who wasn't fully healthy over a fully active rising star signaled that reputation carried more weight than current readiness. Defenders of the decision countered that Gray's experience running high-stakes offenses made her invaluable, even if she wasn't at peak physical condition. The disagreement quickly expanded beyond individual players and turned into a broader conversation about how institutions balance loyalty with innovation. Clark later reflected on that moment as one of the most eye-opening phases of her career. She said it forced her to recognize that professional sports aren't governed solely by box scores or highlight reels. Relationships, history, and trust all play roles in shaping roster decisions, sometimes in ways that outsiders don't immediately see. Rather than resenting that reality, she explained, she chose to study it to understand how veteran leaders maintain influence and how newcomers can gradually earn similar respect. In private training sessions, she reportedly focused on strengthening the aspects of her game most valued in international competition: defensive positioning, off-ball movement, and adaptability to different pacing styles. Coaches who worked with her during that period noted a visible shift in her approach. Instead of chasing spectacular plays, she concentrated on efficiency, discipline, and situational awareness. They described her as more methodical, almost analytical, in how she dissected opponents. Looking back, many analysts now believe that period of exclusion may have accelerated her development. Had she been selected immediately, she might never have undergone the same level of introspection. Instead, the setback became a catalyst, pushing her to refine skills that could make her even more formidable when she finally stepped onto the international stage.